Hi, and welcome to Dockside with Deb. In this weekly show, we'll talk to people who are doing some pretty cool things in sailing and experts in their field. I'm Deborah Diel, sailor, founder of MySail, and your host for today. Dockside with Deb is recorded live, so you can join in and ask your own questions. To find out more, head to mysail.team/docksideWithDeb. Let's get started. So I'd like to start off by thanking Stacey Jackson, who's here with us, very much for joining me today on Dockside with Deb. I'm really excited to hear your stories, and you've got tons of experience to share. So we'll just touch on a little bit of what you've done. But first of all, Stacey, I think let's start by just getting you to kind of tell us a little bit about how you first got into sailing, how you got started, and some of your kind of early days and inspiration.
Sure, thanks for having me along too, Deb. So my sailing started at a pretty young age. I was 7 years old, and the point of getting into sailing was my parents had just bought a cruising boat, and we thought it might be something that we could do as a family. We could sail off and go cruising the Whitsundays. So I had some lessons at a sailing school, and pretty much loved it from then on. It got hooked, wanted to go sailing. I grew up in this little town called Mooloolaba in Queensland, and we had this cute little river we could sail on, and it just was something to do and escape for kids who didn't have cars and things like that. We could just go sailing around on the river in our little dinghies.
Yeah, nice. And so then you've done a lot in offshore sailing. Kind of what was some of your, I guess, progression, and how did you kind of learn and move into more of that professional level?
Sure. So I all through school and high school I sailed dinghies in Mooloolaba, and I had just having done this sort of cruising with my parents on a 35-foot boat, which I just thought was the biggest boat in the world when you're a teenager, but it wasn't enough for me. I loved the concept of being able to go from A to B on a boat, and obviously a dinghy is too small to do it. So I soon worked out that sailing on bigger yachts, and particularly doing the races, you could do the Sydney to Gold Coast or the Sydney to Hobart, and even then there used to be a race Sydney to Mooloolaba, which I would every year go down and watch the boats come in. So I think that was really the moment where I decided I wanted to race big boats. So to make that transition, where I grew up, there wasn't a lot of racing boats. So I decided I needed to move to Sydney to sail on these amazing Sydney to Hobart racing yachts, which all sounds well and good. That's a great plan, but executing it was, going to be a bit harder. So I told my parents that that's it, I'm off. I'm packing my bags and going to Sydney to race yachts. And my dad decided that perhaps I should have a job before I moved to Sydney and had something to go to. So I applied and got a job as a sailmaker's apprentice at North South in Sydney. And so that was my first step into sailing big boats in Sydney.
Okay, wow. And that's obviously, becoming the sailmaker's apprentice is a great way to get into sailing through just the connections and the knowledge. And tell us a little bit more about kind of that experience and how you went once you did arrive in Sydney.
So arriving in Sydney as an 18-year-old from this tiny little town was terrifying. I can tell you. I certainly thought I was braver than I was. So that was actually really hard to do. But in hindsight, I'm stoked I had the courage or the ignorance to do it. But taking the apprenticeship with North South was a really clever move. Little did I know that I'd made a really good choice by doing that. Or any apprenticeship in the marine industry would give you the same effect. I was learning a skill that was helping me become a sailor on a big boat, and it was connecting me in the industry. So every sail you made, you learn about that boat, and then you may even get the opportunity to go racing on that boat, and you just met a lot of people who had like-minded interests in, you know, the other apprentices. You know, I'm still really good friends with the other guys that were apprentices when I came through, and we just helped each other go sailing and get rides and meet other people in the industry.
Yeah, nice. And how did I guess you transition from being the sailmaker's apprentice and sailing, getting different rides and stuff? What was kind of your journey from there to, I think maybe we'll jump right into kind of the Volvo Ocean Race, because one of the things that Stacey has done is been a competitor in 2 Volvo Ocean Race. And I'd be really interested to know, I guess, more about how you went to that, because that's, of course, for offshore sailors, you know, the pinnacle of what you're going to do. And tell us a little bit more about that journey for you.
Sure. So I got through my apprenticeship. I did 4 years of the course, and really loved sailmaking. And it actually, I did have a little step in between doing the Volvo Ocean Race. I was lucky enough, right time, right place, to get a job working on one of the maxi boats, Allfemale, which is now Blackjack 100. You know, and I was the shoreside sailmaker. I was using my skill to work to get into that industry, and that in turn rolled on. I met a lot of Volvo sailors who raced on that boat, and that was just a really neat link into the next level of sailing for me, purely by chance, but by chance in the sense that I was a sailmaker. So I'd done my hard yards already to learn the skill, and then I was very lucky. I got my first job out of my apprenticeship was a very good job. So there's an element of luck there. I did that job for 3 years and then progressed and worked on some other boats. I worked on both Wild Oats and Black as well once I returned to Australia. But that just had built a lot of miles by then, doing deliveries and races on some really high profile yachts. And then I was, again, a little element of luck came into it, that there happened to be a Volvo team that was put together that was all female. And so this was the first time this had happened in 12 years. Now, I'd always grown up following the Volvo and the Whitbread race at the time, and I had always dreamed to do the race. And I remember I said it out loud to my parents when I was 14 years old. I said, I'm going to do that race one day. And, you know, they go, all right, okay, off you go. And little did I know that it would actually come true. So the opportunity came up, and I put my expression of interest in that I would like to trial for the team. And that came around, and I got my trial. I did my trial, and I came home and waited for my email to say whether I made the team or not. And I didn't get the job, which was really heartbreaking, because I did everything I knew how to do on the delivery and the trial period, and you know, and I just you know, didn't get the job. And so I kept working hard and sort of said to them, okay, well, you know, I still want to do the race, and let me know if I can try again or something. Anyway, sort of a few months passed, and they came back to me and said, oh, we'd like you to come back over and do another trial. And I just backed myself and said, nope, I'm the girl for the job. You want me, I'll come for a job, or that's it. Which was, you know, a risky move, but I was confident that I was good for the job. Anyway, a day later they rang and said, yes, you've got the job, you're on the team, you're the bowman. So, you know, you take what you can get.
What was your prior experience with bow? I mean, coming from sailmaker, maybe I'm wrong, but generally, you know, sailmakers get put in trim positions, which make a lot of sense for people make sails. So what was your experience on bow prior to this?
I'd actually done a lot of sailing on the bow. Mainly started doing bow through match racing, women's match racing. I sailed with Katie Spithill and her team for many years, and I was originally her trimmer. But once I got a job working on Allfemale, I couldn't commit to all the regattas. So I swapped with Nina Curtis, who became the trimmer, and I became the bowman, because I could sort of come in and out of different events. So I had learnt a lot about the bow. Obviously, match racing boats aren't the same as a Volvo Ocean Race boat, but I had also done a lot of bow on Blackjack and Wild Oats 10 and things like that. So yeah, I wasn't in the dark on doing the bow. It's just if I could have picked my spots, I would have tried to have been a little bit further back in the boat.
Yeah, it's the constant like goal of a bow person, isn't it, to move back as much as you can.
Exactly.
Well, that must have been, I mean, after trying so hard to get that position and then getting it, and like you said, having to go back a second time and backing yourself, which is amazing, and it's such a brave thing to do, just that. Like, what was kind of your experience, you know, your initial experience? What was your feelings when you did get that position?
So there's a fair amount of relief that I had now got the job, but that was actually turned out to be the easiest part of the whole campaign, was getting the job. Then the hard work began. We trained for, I joined the team and we did a year of training before the race started, and the girls who were already part of the team had already done almost a year. So it was a very long lead up for us, because we were lacking some experience, because it'd been 12 years since any women had competed in the race. So we had a lot to learn before the race started. We did a lot of fitness training. We weren't, and I'm still not a particularly big person, so we tried to make up for that. We tried to be as strong as possible. So every day we were in the gym for an hour and a half, and then we would go training on the boat as well for 6 to 8 hours a day. And then you would eat, shower, crash out, and start the process all over again the next day. And we did that for quite a while, and then we started to do more offshore training. So we were doing some longer, we did a couple of transatlantic training runs. We delivered the boat up to the UK from the Canary Islands, where our team was based. And then we started to do races, which were all lead up races to the Volvo Ocean Race.
Okay. And how long did that training period go altogether?
So from when I joined the team, it was a year of training. So that was actually, we had already completed the same amount of miles as the race before the Volvo started. Wow. So we'd sort of done over 40,000 nautical miles of training. So we felt we had done what we could to be prepared in a situation that we didn't have the experience for, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and that's interesting, like you said, because I hadn't been an all-female team, and, you know, prior to that, you know, female representation was almost nothing. In the Volvo Ocean Race, that you didn't really have a pool of people that you could choose from that brought experience to the team, you know, from doing it before. Obviously, you've got different relevant experience, but I mean, was that something that you think really kind of impacted your ability on the team, or how did your team kind of get around that lack of kind of Volvo Ocean Race experience?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough. We did have we had three ladies who had competed in the race, but being 12 years ago, it's amazing not what you forget, but what you choose not to remember. I think, you know, the tough parts of the race, they never seem as bad, even a year later or 2 years later. So 12 years, you're going to forget what a lot of it was and what's required to do the race. So we had a very experienced team of coaches who did initially, and this is why I didn't get the job the first time around, was because they really thought there would be more women with ocean sailing experience, but there weren't, because it'd been so long since, you know, there'd been a full female team in the race. You know, obviously Adrian Cahalan had navigated a few races before it, but not a full team of women sailing together. And that's a big key part of, you know, an all female team, is that it's not just one or two women amongst a mixed team. So that was what we were trying to bridge, that gap. And our coaches were doing a really brilliant job. We had coaches that had done 4 and 5 races themselves, so they at least have a lot of experience to teach us. But learning it is very different, and gaining that experience yourself is a very different experience than having someone tell you about it.
Yeah, I guess so. Like you said, having the things you choose to forget, like, you know, I'm sure you have some really good days and some really not so good days, like anyone who does any kind of sailing or offshore sailing. Tell us about some of the kind of, I guess, even if we're thinking about the race or some of the lead-up races you've done, what are some of the kind of hardest moments for you that you kind of had to go through?
In the race itself, the whole race, the whole concept of the race, one of the hardest things about it is you leave your life behind to do this race. So I was away for 2 years in total with Team SCA, and a year with Vestas 11th Hour Racing, and that's a really hard thing to do. So you've got to leave your home and your family, and you go and you follow this race around, you do this race around the world. That is a challenge. You spend long periods of time at sea, and that's also disconnected from the world. Most teams allow you to use the boat's email. Some teams even let you make a phone call. Our team didn't do that. We were a little bit more tried to focus just on the racing, and then we had some small amount of comms on and off the boat through emails, which were going through race headquarters, so you didn't tend to write too many personal details in them anyway. That is one of the biggest challenges of the race. For the rest of it, it's hard, it's tiring, it's, you've just got to have this endurance that goes for 9 months. But for me, that wasn't that difficult, because I'd put myself in that position. I wanted to do the race and I wanted to be there. So when I got woken up at 3 in the morning to go and watch, I just reminded myself that I'm here because I want to be here, and I want to win this race. I want to sail my best to try and help our team win the race. So, there are those tough moments, and granted, I didn't always get up cheery and I'm happy to be here, because it is tough, it is tiring, and you get put through a lot, but very satisfying results when you have sailed across an ocean or a quarter of the way around the world, and you've done that by being part of a team.
Yeah, I guess that's interesting, because with the race, it does have the stops. So you must go through this kind of, and from what you just said, a lot of that, it's physically tiring and everything, but it's really the mental side of it and being mentally tough to kind of get yourself through that. How about, how did you feel every time you got to a stop, but then you had to leave again? How did that kind of play on things?
So in my first race around the world, that was a massive part of what we needed to learn about the race, because our coaches can tell you, maybe you fly home, you go and see your family, but that's not always, when you live in Australia, flying home from every corner of the earth isn't always that easy. So I stayed with the race because I really wanted to embrace the entire experience, as in going and seeing countries and cities that I'd never been to before. We had a really good schedule for when you arrived. We got checked out by the doctors. We would have a team debrief, and then we'd get a period of time off. And depending on the length of the stopover, that could be anywhere between 3 days or 7 days. And then we'd always come back online in time enough to test sail the boat, because that would normally have been dismantled to a degree in service. And then we would test sail it, and then do our practice race, our import race, and then we would leave again. So that is quite a hard moment that night before the next leg. Now, knowing that where you're going, you've also, the weather forecast. So, you know what you're going to be in for the first few days of the leg. And that can be quite nerve-wracking as well. Knowing, we had a couple of my second race on Vestas 11th Hour Racing, it was basically a really windy race the whole way around the world, and we had some really hairy leg starts where we left Cape Town in 40+ knots of wind. So they're pretty unique moments in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine, especially, you know, you've just had this great kind of holiday, I guess, almost. Like, it sounds like you did a little bit of touring, which is cool. But then you kind of have to get yourself back into it as well. So kind of this kind of mental, I guess, game of kind of keep going. One of the things I wanted to kind of touch on, because you have been involved in two events, like you said, Team SCA, which was the all-female crew, and then with Vestas, which was a mixed crew. Thinking about kind of like the differences in the team dynamics, really, and how the team was run, what are kind of some of the key things that were different between those? And, you know, and almost the good and the bad from each. I'm sure there's probably positives that you can pull from both sides of those. What are some of the kind of key differences there?
Well, I think the big difference is so Team SCA was an all-female team, and as a result of Team SCA's successes, though, you know, we actually finished 6 out of the 7 boats in the race. The big success was that going into the next edition, there was now females on every team. So for us, we made this pivotal moment in the course of offshore sailing, that all the other teams realized there was an advantage to having, if you had your 2 female crew, you got 2 extra, they were bonus crew members. So by the end of the race, every team had their full quota of females on board, and which then in turn produced the first ever female to win the Volvo Ocean Race, which is, you know, 35 years into the race it took for that moment to happen. And Caroline and Justine, two of those 3 members of the team, were from our original Team SCA crew. So, you know, that was quite cool to see our old teammates succeed. One of the things that I sort of mentioned already with Team SCA, we lacked the experience. Starting the race, we had a real different range of abilities on board, but so we got to this point in the race where the less experienced people caught up, and we all sort of plateaued out at the same experience, and we weren't able to learn from other people on our boat because we'd all sort of matched up a little bit. But then going into Vestas 11th hour racing, I was on a boat. Our navigator he was doing his 5th race and he'd won 3 already. My watchmate was doing his 6th race around the world, which is a Kiwi guy, Tony Mutter. So for me to be able to spend every minute of my on watch with a guy who's doing his 6th race around the world, you can't not learn something, you know. So in every moment for me was this, like, just this amazing chance to learn something from Tony and our other teammates. We had a very experienced crew, though quite a lot of young people. I think we had 4 or 5 under 30s on our team. But yeah, so that experience was the difference, and what we could learn from each other on board the boat was an awesome part of it.
Yeah, amazing. And what position did you do when you were on Vestas? Were you still on the bow?
I moved slightly further back in the boat. So with Team SCA, I was the bowman, along with Sophie Cizek out of Melbourne. And then with Vestas 11th hour racing, I was in the pit, but then also got to get on the bow. Yep. So I sort of stepped back one spot. So when it was an all hands maneuver, I would be in the pit. And then when the sail, like the preparation for this, because we were sailing with only we were 9 crew on board, so it's quite a small number of people for a 65-foot yacht. So when we're connecting a sail or preparing for the sail change, I would be on the bow, and then I would come back and do the pit. And then when the sail was coming down, I would then go forward and help get the sail down and away. So I got my step count up pretty well in the sail maneuver.
Running back and forth and multitasking, it's good. And this is probably a hard question to answer because I'm sure every day is very different, but talk us through kind of a typical day in the life of being offshore and racing one of these yachts, or, you know, maybe how it's different during different legs or different kind of conditions.
Sure. I think the big thing about it is actually living on board. your life on board. So, you know, you can understand what a watch is like. That's like any, like keeping a watch doing the Sydney to Hobart race or the Pure to Coffs race. You know, you do your 4 hours on, 4 hours off, and in your 4 hours, you do a bit of trimming, you do some grinding, you do a bit of driving, and you sort of keep that rotation. So we always had a fresh helmsman. The main sheet trimmer was always sort of keeping the helmsman honest, and then the grinders were just, you know, just always on the go, always switched on, ready to, you know, grind. Do a lot of that. But then, like, the other aspect of it is you're in a 65-foot yacht. There's 9 crew and an onboard reporter. So though I had just said in my last sentence, it's not many people. It's a lot of people when you're living on the boat for a month at a time. So that's a challenge in itself. You know, typically you would share a bunk with your opposite. So we had it on Vestas 11th Hour Racing. I was opposite Hannah Diamond, or Jenna, out of Denmark. And so you know, they'd come and wake you up, and you'd start the process of dragging yourself out of the bunk and getting dressed for what you needed to wear for that day or evening. And that's where life changes on the boat. So the two comparisons, people always ask me, hot versus cold, which one would I prefer? And I think I just lean towards the hot weather rather than the cold weather. So in the heat, you know, we're crossing the equator. We crossed the equator 4 times in the race. That is painful because there's no wind when you cross the equator, so there's no like breeze blowing. It's just that gentle breeze you always think of when you're sailing. It's not there. And because there's no wind, you everything is moved to the front of the boat to try and reduce, you know, the drag of the boat. So you're sleeping on the hull. You're not in your bunk anymore. So there's no fans. There's nothing like that. The water temperature, the sea temperature, is about between 38 and 40 degrees. So when you want that nice cold glass of water to cool down, and it comes out of the water tank and it's 38 degrees, you know, that's not all that pleasant. But then you verse that towards sailing in the Southern Ocean, where it's 0 degree air temperature. The water's maybe 2 or 3 degrees. It snows in the Southern Ocean, which for a Queenslander, that's really weird. Still to this day, the only places I've ever seen it snow is in the Southern Ocean. So I'm not one to take skiing holidays or anything like that. But then that's a whole different process. So you get woken up. I asked my opposite to wake me up with 25 minutes before my watch, because it takes you that long to put all your layers on to get up on deck. And then, you do your watch, and then you come off watch, and you take whatever amount of clothes off that you needed, and then you'd have your dinner or your breakfast, and then get back into bed and hope that you get your 4 hours without a sail change or a tack or something.
Yeah, and I guess because if it's taking you 25 minutes to get up every time, then, you know, if you need a sail change, it would be quite a lengthy process to get up and get ready and get everything done. And in between all of that, you know, if you've got 4 hours off and there's 25 hours on each end to get ready, then there's not a lot of sleep in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, you're having a good, you're going well if you get maybe 3 hours of sleep each off watch. So that's pretty good. So in theory, that's 9 hours a day. You know, if you're lucky enough that nothing happens in your off watch. Almost every maneuver, particularly in the Southern Ocean, every maneuver is all hands, just because it's windier, it's cold. Your dexterity is not as good in the cold. So so every jibe or every sail change would be all hands. And even sometimes to take a reef, if it was really windy, we might need to get a couple of people up on deck. So you sort of, yeah, the chances of getting your 9 hours a day is not necessarily that high, but I can tell you appreciate whatever sleep you do get.
Yeah, I'm sure. And we actually have a question from the audience. Brian asks about any funny stories to break up the miles, or any kind of funny, I guess, things that happened on board that you can tell us.
Yeah, I tell you what, you come up with all sorts of ways of sort of breaking it up, or one of the best ones was the different technique for counting down the miles or the days. You know, at one point we got a heads up from our navigator that we were 5 days from Cape Horn. So that's a whole working week if you think of it like that. By now we'd already done 7 days because it took us 12 days to get to Cape Horn. One of our crew had decided he was going to count the watches rather than the days. So rather than being 5 days, you have 3 watches in a day. So now he's got 15 to count down. I'm like, I don't think you're helping yourself out here, because your number is still a lot bigger. But he decided that it goes down quicker. So he thought he was getting to Cape Horn faster.
Some kind of logic in that, I'm sure.
I think the cold had got to him by then.
Yeah, maybe. Or lack of sleep, too many sail changes off watch.
Possibly.
Oh, that's amazing. So Stacey, one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about that you put together was actually 2018. You put together an all-female crew to do the Sydney Hobart, and you guys did, or you gals, I guess, did amazingly well, coming in second place overall on IRC, which is, you know, fantastic, especially for a team that was put together quite last minute from what I remember. Can you tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to put this together, and, you know, how you went about putting together this campaign?
Yeah, so I had the idea towards the end of the 17-18 Volvo Ocean Race. It sort of occurred to me that looking around all the teams, there were all these brilliant female sailors, and they were spread out between the 17s. You know, we had bowmans and trimmers and drivers and navigators. Between the whole fleet, all the positions were covered throughout the boats by females. So I thought, wouldn't it be really cool to sort of just, you know, sort of like almost a check back in to see how we were going from Team SCA, but sort of bring it to a broader pool of people and get all those awesome women together and see how we would race a boat again. So I sort of thought, well, though the Volvo Ocean Race is like this, it really is one of it's for me, it's the pinnacle of offshore racing. But Sydney to Hobart is an all-time favourite of mine, because I think it is more achievable to be able to do, and, you know, you can do it at any degree as well. So, you know, to come along and sort of put in a team and skipper it myself, I thought would be really cool. So I asked a few of the women who were in the Volvo and women back in Australia I knew whether they would be interested. And when I sort of recap how I did it, it sounds really easy. You know, I approached the Oakley family, the owners of Wild Oats, and asked whether Wild Oats 10 would be available for me to take to Hobart. And when I say it like that, it doesn't really, who would do that? But I did it. I asked them, and they were really supportive of it. They just thought it was a brilliant idea. And I also wanted to continue a lot about what had happened, or what I learned about in the Volvo Ocean Race was the sustainability side of, you know, our industry or our sport. And we had a lot of education, and we were doing a lot of education throughout the race to show people how they can help reduce this ocean plastics problem that we're having. So I thought, wouldn't it be really cool to bring that message home as well and continue the work we were doing with Vestas 11th Hour Racing. So I got the boat and I approached 11th Hour Racing and said, well, would you like to just do a little bit? It was like one more leg, you know, do the Sydney to Hobart and they thought it was awesome because we had a really brief appearance in Australia during the Volvo. But they could see that there was, there's this, the city of Hobart's just watched by the whole country. So, let's do it, and let's spread the message a little bit further. So yeah, it was a short campaign. We only took charge of the boat on December 1st, and we did a few days of training, and we had some new sails that the Oatley family were kind enough to put on the boat. So we had to look at those, and we had to do a qualifier because we hadn't done any of the races yet this year or that year. And we ticked off our safety, everything that we should and wanted to do going into the Hobart race. At the end of the race, when we finished the Hobart race, that was our 12th day of sailing as a crew. So it was a short campaign. We didn't have a great deal of time, but amazingly proud of the team and our message, getting to Hobart in one piece for starters. That's often the challenge of the city to Hobart, and then to get there in a timely manner. That was nice. That was the fastest race I've ever done, and then also to get there and eventually become second overall in handicap. We were really proud. This close, but we'll take it.
Yeah, that's an amazing result. And what do you think kind of went into that? Because I mean, you don't win a Sydney Hobart by luck. There's a certain element of luck that you get the right kind of weather for your boat, in that year and stuff like that, but you still have to perform well, especially in the bigger end of town, to, get a result like that. What do you think that was, especially bringing together the crew so last minute?
Yeah, exactly. So you've mentioned about the luck for the weather, and clearly it was the forecast for our size of boat, because first place was our sister ship, also a Rykel Q66, and we finished within 17 minutes of each other. So we were obviously, it was right for us. But 100% it came down to, within our crew, we had, I think it was about 75 Hobart races in experience, and we had 21 laps of the planet amongst our 12 crew. So we were a very experienced crew. We had people like Vanessa Dudley on board, who was doing a 23rd race, and we had Dee Kafari, who sailed around the planet 7 times or something silly like that now. So experience was certainly on our side. And the cool thing is, and you never really know how this will go with a team, but we just gelled really well. And I think that was a combination. I like to take credit for that, but I think it's all on the girls. That it was a combination that we'd either all sailed together or against each other, or wanted to sail with each other in the past. And I think that those elements help. We had a lot of Dee Kafari, my second in charge, and she's one of the women up to most in sailing. Libby Greenhouse was our navigator, and I would trust no one more than her to get us to Hobart in the fastest possible way. And special note to Libby, she did an amazing job on the second night. We had this weird sea fog, which at the time I would say I've never seen that before, but we got it again last year. So that was climate change, I guess. But she really kept on us. She pushed us hard through the night, and we had an amazing game that second night in that fog. So, and we had a lot of women who were very, very experienced, but very excited to show what we could do as an all-female team.
Yeah, amazing. Like you said, like tons of experience in that, 75 Hobarts and 21 trips around the world. So that's a lot of experience for a Hobart team. I've got a question here from Bridget. Thoughts on mixed Olympic double-handed offshore, or female two-handed offshore? I don't know if she means thoughts on you doing it, but let's look at that. Like, do you have any kind of thoughts around that new event that's being put into the Olympics, and is that something that you potentially might be looking at?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting move for Olympics. you know, sailing's a hard spectator sport, particularly offshore sailing. I think the Volvo does a really great job of having cameras on board and reporters who, that's their full job, is to send something interesting off the boat. I know in experience that sometimes they really digging deep for an interesting story to send off the boat. So, you know, that will be it. That will be a big job that the Olympics have to make, you know, to make it a spectator sport. Pretty cool that it is a two-handed mixed team. You know, I would really, I like the rule change that we're sort of enforcing the, you know, the quota of male and female. I'd almost really like to see that as an open class, because I reckon there's quite a few two-handed women's teams that would probably kick ass in it. So it'd be interesting to see how it unfolds. This year, you know, unfortunately, they were going to have the World Championships in Europe, and that's been cancelled. So I actually believe Australia is going to be, you know, leading the way with the two-handed, with the Blue Water Series now two-handed. So that's cool, because it's, you know, there's been a lot of races happening in Australia that you can't compete in two-handed. So it's definitely a nice move in, you know, sort of opening up the rules to different forms of sailing. And yeah, so we'll see. I'm not really sure, you know, Olympics is never too much been my dream. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to see. Stay tuned.
Nice. Keep it open. And I also wanted to ask you about some of the environmental stuff, because you're also a very passionate environmental sustainability campaigner. You mentioned it was part of the kind of driver and motivation behind the 2018 Sydney Hobart campaign that you did. I guess what's kind of your driver behind that, and what are some of the initiatives that you've been working on and that you are working on in that area?
Yeah, so I really, it was a real eye-opener. So both Volvos took us to parts of the world that, you know, I'd never been to before, sailing up through Asia, you know, across the middle of oceans where you're coming across debris and rubbish, particularly plastics. So it was really, it was real eye-opener and quite alarming to see how much there is out there, and thousands of miles from land, and we're coming across rubbish that is ultimately been put there by humans. You know, so it was quite sad, and I really sort of I thought it was a way that, you know, we can all make that little difference. So I thought I'd love to be one of those people that try and help make that difference. So at the end of the race, I thought this is really cool. We've learned a lot. We've spread our message. But coming home to Australia was one of the worst places I've seen for, maybe not as much as the rubbish in the water, but the use of what becomes the rubbish. You know, crews still using single-use water bottles on board, you know, just the coffee cups, the takeaway containers, the plastic knives and forks, all that sort of waste that contributes to this problem. So I really wanted to get involved and help sort of share the message about let's trying to reduce the plastics. I started the Ocean Respect Racing as our Sydney to Hobart campaign, and we had an amazing thing. We got to get involved with a couple of organisations. We worked with Clean Up Australia and Ocean Crusaders, who are based out of Queensland, where I sail my dinghy. And we'd organised some cleanups with them, and I still I still go along and volunteer with Ocean Crusaders up here and get involved. They've got a bunch of different projects they're working on. They're sort of making use of plastics that can't be recycled. They're sort of repurposing them. They do a lot of cleanup of debris in the waterways around Queensland and actually all up and down the East Coast. So I like to see all that stuff continue. And, you know, right now it's a lot of people are struggling with it because we have other problems right now in our lives with the current sort of situation. But you know, and a lot of the rules are harder to follow right now, because you're not allowed to use your tip cup at the coffee shop and things like that. So you know, it's sort of, these are the times where we've actually got to try a little bit harder to help, you know, because for me, ultimately, what I want to do is help look after, you know, where I spend my spare time, where I work, where I play, you know, and that's the ocean or the harbour or the river or wherever it may be that you live.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And what you were mentioning about right now with the keep cups and stuff, of course, that's been hard, especially because you can't even sit down there and have a coffee. So really, if you're going to go out and buy a coffee, which I guess, you know, you don't have to, you can make that at home, but that has been hard. But I've definitely seen a transition, you know, in the clubs and racing that I've done over the last kind of couple years with the water bottles, as you mentioned. So a lot of teams going to having reusable water bottles on board and refilling those instead of having the single-use plastics. So yeah, I've definitely seen a movement in that area. And so yeah, good on you. That's really good change. And also, you know, it saves money as well as protects the environment and stuff. So there's lots of benefits to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, like, you know, right now, like you just said with the coffee shop, you know, we should go and buy that coffee because it's gonna help, you know, someone else. But it is a hard thing to do. So I guess when we are allowed to sit down or take our coffee cups, we'll have to make up for all this coffee we haven't been drinking.
Yeah, exactly. And you also have, you know, a business that kind of has a sustainability lens to it as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have my little business on the side when I'm not sailing. So right now it's getting my full-time attention. I repurpose old sails. So it sort of occurred to me during my first Volvo, and I did by no means come up with this idea. There's plenty of companies overseas who do this, but I figured there must be all these sails that once they are no good for racing or even, you know, for club cruising or whatever, they will probably get thrown out. So I use that as the material for the base of the bag, and then so about 90% of the bag is recycled or upcycled materials, and so then I put a little nautical twist on it, and so it's naughty bags. And I sort of just do that, you know, using my sail making skill, and sort of keeps me out of trouble a little bit when I'm at home.
Yeah, I guess it's a good thing to do, especially now. Well, there's no sailing, so you've got, you know, something to, like you said, keep you out of trouble. And I've seen that you've started posting on Facebook some of the bags and what the sales are, so where they've come from, so people can see that, okay, you've gotten a sale, it's from whatever, you know, boat or race or something. So that's kind of a cool little twist as well.
Yeah, I thought it was, you know, because every bag is no bag is exactly the same, because it's either a different part of the material, or I just made it with a different pattern or whatever, like, or different colors or things. But I thought every bag has a story, and you know, so I've put in an extra bit. If the bag has a particular story that's really cool and I want to share it, you know, I have a bit of material that I managed to bring home from the Volvo from Dongfeng, the team that won the race. So there's like a bit of history there in the sail. I've got sails left over from Blackjack that were Telefonica in the previous edition of the Volvo Ocean Race. So yeah, it's kind of cool. Or, you know, and I'm also, I get sails given to me by the owner of the boat, and we've made bags for the crew. And then we've sort of added that story so they know, you know, that it's a nice keepsake as well.
Yeah, that's cool. We have a couple of questions actually related to the bags. Sarah wants to know, what's the most expensive sail that you've made a naughty bag out of?
What's the most expensive sail I've just cut up with a pair of scissors?
Yep.
That would be, actually, I don't know if you noticed, but I've got one just sitting here.
Yeah.
So that's a 3DI sail, and that was manufactured with North Sails, but it got damaged being shipped to the boat. So and it was going towards the TP CP52 Super Series. So, you know, they're the highest perfectionist level. And because this sail had been damaged, they no longer wanted it. So they gave it to me, and I rolled it out in my living room of all places, and I took to it with a pair of scissors. So that's it's kind of satisfying in a way, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine. How funny. Well, it's much better than it just getting kind of thrown out as well, like you said. So that answers Jay's question as well, who wanted to know what that lovely bag was sitting in the background. So yeah.
That's a medium kit bag, and you can find that on my website.
There you go. Yeah. Awesome. And so I do have one more kind of audience question. And as we're going through that, if anybody else does have a question, just pop it in the Q&A so we can get that answered for you. But Erin was said that you're an amazing role model for all sailors, especially women. So, and she would like to know what your next challenge is.
My next challenge would probably be getting across the Queensland border, to be honest. Yeah, so it's been a little, it's been tough these last few months for everyone, but sort of finding that focus, going back into sailing will probably be one of the biggest challenges that a lot of us will do, whether you're going back into your work, you know, just going back to the office to work, or, you know, well, I guess a lot of people homeschooled, so they've probably already done that challenge. But, you know, so for me, it will be the first step we'll be able to do is go back to the Blue Water Series racing. You know, there could be a big project coming up. I don't know what it is just yet, but I definitely always are thinking, what is the next big cool thing I can do? So, but for now, you know, the Sydney to Hobart is always my goal every year, is to do that, and I really love doing that race. So hopefully we'll get some racing in, and then we'll get to go to Hobart again this year.
Great. And do you have a yacht lined up for Hobart and Blue Water this year, or is that still in play?
Yeah, I have been sailing with Chinese Whisper. I was actually running last summer for the Sydney to Hobart. I was the boat captain, so I did all the maintenance and prep work for the boat. And providing I can get back to Sydney sometime soon, I hope to go racing with them for the rest of the year. David Griffiths is pretty keen to get out sailing, the owner of the boat. So yeah, hopefully we'll be there soon.
Yeah, nice. Okay, well, it'll be great to see you if you're down in Sydney. And you don't have any more questions from the audience, so we'll wrap it up there. But Stacey, huge thanks again for joining us today and telling us about your experience. It's been amazing. And I'll pop a link to Naughty Bags in with this video on Facebook, so that if anybody's looking to buy a very expensive 3DI sail that's been turned into a bag, they know where to go.
It's now a cheap bag, but very expensive sail.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So yeah, thanks again. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Deb, and keep up the great work. I love watching these webinars each week.
Oh, great. Thank you. And see everyone. See you next week. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you'd like to know more about this program or the MySail app and community, head on over to mysail.team. That's mysail.team. Until next time, stay safe and happy sailing.